shlokas. The last one, Asmat Rupa Samavishta. I don't know if this clock is right. Huh? Because it 10 minutes different. Oh, it is all the clocks are wrong. It's wonderful. Inverted, yeah. Yeah, but so I'm wrongly looking at it. Maybe we repeat Namah Shivaya.
Namah Shivaya Satatam Panchakritya Vidhayine Chidananda Ghana Swatma Paramatha Vabhasine Namah Shivaya Satatam Panchakritya Vidhayine Chidananda Ghana Swatma Paramatha Vabhasine.
I'm sorry, at 11 o'clock I announced the Dehasta Devata Chakra Stota, but it was the Guru Stuti because it was written on the CD. So what we heard was the Guru Stuti from Srinagar. Now before we proceed, you have received this table. So just to give you a little orientation, we are here at the very highest mystical level, but it may be helpful to situate whatever we have been reading, discussing, and did you not get? Yeah, the last one. Yes. But also everything is at a very high mystical level. Still, they are always very conscious at which level of consciousness, which level of the word, etc., these experiences are placed. And this table, I have prepared it on the basis, of course, of the Tantras, but as most systematically prepared by Abhinavagupta in his Tantraloka. But it is all connected. In other texts, it is very clear. So there are different categories, and you only are concerned with that which we have already discussed. These are the upayas, the means of ways to liberation. Now you have 4 levels, because in the morning we had these 4 states, Jagat, Swapna, Sushupti. So that is why it's good to come back to this scheme and to see where the others are corresponding at this same level, what corresponds to the level of waking, of dreaming, of deep sleep, and of the transcendental thought. So here you have the penultimate avastha, that is the state which we have had in the morning, Jagat, Swapna, Sushupti, Turiya. Then we have the Shaktis. We had also the Shaktis, where we had Icha Shakti, Uma Kumari, and Svatandriya Shakti, which is not any category because it embraces the whole totality of Shaktis. So it is not at any particular level. Then we have the ways to liberation, that means the upayas. So from the maybe, have you got this? You have got this. So the one which is beyond any means is anupaya, so that would correspond to turiya, to the 4th. And the other 3 correspond to Shambhava, Shakta, and Anava, the divine, the way of energy, and the individual. Now, you can always see the horizontal correspondence. What corresponds to what? Now, in relation between the upayas and the shaktis, the energies of Shiva in descending order, of course, Anupaya is beyond, and it is Chitananda and everything, beyond the 3. Then Shambhava is at the level of Icha. And that is why this Icha Shakti Uma Kumari has come here in the context of Shambhavopaya. And as I said, the translation will is not at all satisfactory, but it's the primal impulse of knowing and doing anything, of any kind of inspiration, etc. And at the level of the way of energy, it is knowledge, jnana. Because there you do work with ideas, with vikalpas, with thoughts, and from thoughts you proceed to thoughtlessness. And at the level of the individual way, it is kriya, it's very clear, activity, because as long as you are in the level of duality, you have to do all kinds of rituals and mantras and yoga and this and that. And through that activity, then you can ascend to the next higher, to the level of knowledge, jnana, and shaktopaya. And in all these schemes, whatever looks like a hierarchy, like the hierarchy of the 36 tattvas, which you have also received the list, there are always 2 ways, the descending and the ascending. So the descending is either from the level of Shiva himself down to the lowest, to the earth, or also the descending of the highest yogi, as we had this Mahayogi, who is already identified with Shiva or with Bhairava, and who, whatever activity he does at the lower level, it is his descent into, also out of compassion, and that is often said. From his high level, he descends down to the individual level. It's not that these great yogis, they do not perform any rituals, or they do not do any maybe social action, but they do it from their level of consciousness. So they are not bound by that ritual or by that action, but they do it out of compassion and out of participation in what the others need and what the others are doing. And in the categories also of the trika, so all these things we have talked about, but just to give you a kind of framework and place these things. Shiva, Shakti, Nara, this is the trika, the triad. So Shiva at the level of Shambhava and Icha Shakti, Shakti at the level of Jnana, and Nara, the individual, at the level of Kriya Shakti, or activity. And, of course, the individual. And metaphysically, or levels of consciousness, at the individual level, there is always a sense of difference and duality, Bheda. Then at the intermediary Shakta level, there is a combination of duality cum non-duality, Bheda. And at the level of the divine way, it is Abheda, or non-duality, unity. And then I have also referred to the 4 levels of the word, of language, because we had this topic in the third or fourth sutra. So these 4 levels of the word from below, again, this is a descent and an ascent. So in descent from para, the supreme word, which is identical with the Turiya state, down to Pashyanti, that intuitive, visionary word which corresponds to Icha. And this is very clear, because Icha, if that is the primary impulse, and Pashyanti is that original intuitive, the origin of language, which is not yet language, but which is only that initial impulse, intuition, etc. So Icha and Pashyanti are very much corresponding. And Madhyama, of course, because Madhyama is at the level of thought, it corresponds to Jnana and to the Shaktopaya. And Vaikari, the embodied or expressed word, corresponds to the activity, or the Kriya Shakti also, and to the sense of difference, Bheda. So you see how this whole system, although sometimes you think, oh, it's very high mystical ideas and very disconnected and so on, but it is so much connected and so logical that when you enter from one side, you will get connected to all the other levels. So this is something incredible, which will be very helpful if one goes on studying this tradition. I often say it's like a puzzle where in the beginning you have some pieces and then you get some more pieces and then slowly, then it makes a whole image. And that totality of that image is very consistent. It's not that something is out of order or out of place, but ultimately it all falls into place. So this is just the kind of help I have given you for placing and situating these levels about which we are talking, the levels of waking, dream, deep sleep, and so on, into that context. Now we come back to the next sutra. Again, one of these extremely brief sutras, which can be consisting of 2 words, which can be interpreted either this way or that way, and in opposing ways. And this is the wonderful thing about this multiple meanings of a sutra. Drishyam Shariram. Of course, Kshemaraja connects it with the previous sutra, which had that great yogi whose power of will is Uma Kumari. And of the same, it all relates to the same yogi, means that yogi who is in the Shambhava state, who is on that divine level. Drishyam Shariram. Now, Drishya means whatever is visible, the object, any object. Sharira means body. So, Drishyam Shariram. Whatever is an object is a body. So, what does it mean? There are two meanings. Two apparently opposing meanings, but actually they are connected. So one, well, let us go to the commentary. Yat yat drishyam bahyam abhyantaram va tat tat sarvam aham idam iti sadashivavat maha samapatya svanga kalpam asya spurati na pedena. Now, in the first meaning is, so drishya means not only the externally visible objects, but even the internal. It's always said that objectivity is not only external, even our feelings, like sukham is often given as an example, they are also a kind of object. They are not the subject. So drishya means objectivity, both externally and internally. All this, I am all this, means all this is my body. This whole universe is my body. So this is the experience of the yogi who has overcome his sense of individuality and who considers or experiences the whole universe as his body. And this, according to, if you look at the level of these tattvas, it corresponds to the tattva of Sadashiva, this experience. Because Sadashiva is that emanation of Shiva who has that experience that the whole universe is my body. So I am all this. I am all this. This identity. So the yogi also experiences like Sadashiva, that I am all this. Aham idam. Svanga kalpana, so as his own body. And the other meaning is that the yogi is no longer identified with his body. He considers his body as an object. And this, we know this very well. I remember Anandamayi Ma, when she used to talk of herself, she always used to say, this body. This body. Not I. So great yogis. Yes. Yes. And Swamiji also. When he was very sick, he said, just see what happens to this body. This comes spontaneously at that level. It is nothing, made up. It comes spontaneously. You are not identified with this body. So this body is like an object. And later on, we have one also wonderful sutra, Shariram Havi, but we'll come to that. But what means this not being identified not only with the physical body, we had it before, with the body of energy, prana, with the mental body or the dhi or manas or buddhi, or even with the body of the void, shunya. Now, as I said before, shunya is here not the mahashunya, but it is the experience of the individuality in a state of either deep sleep or unconsciousness or at the moment of death. So this is that kind of shunya, individual shunya, experiences of emptiness or voidness in the individual, not the universal shunyata. Shariram cha dehati prana shunya rupam niladivat drishyam. So all this is objectivity. The physical body, the mental body, the body of energy, the body of the void, and so on. They are all object. But not like in the perception of a bound soul, bashu. To the yogi, the body appears as an objective, perceptible phenomenon, and not like the perceiver as in the case of the ignorant empirical beings, whether that body is in the form of deha, and so on. So we have done this. Evam dehe bahyacha sarvatra asya mayuranda rasavat avibhakta eva pratipatir bhavati. Now, whether in the body or externally, in everything external, his awareness is one of undifferentiated consciousness, just like the plasma of the peacock's egg is an undifferentiated plasma. Now, this is a very typical example of the Tantras for this undifferentiated consciousness. A peacock's egg in which everything is in the plasma and that you cannot distinguish any colors or forms or anything, but everything is in one. And yet in that oneness, all the colors and forms of the peacock which will come out are contained in potency. So the potency, like we had in a Paradrishika Tantra, the seed of the banyan tree. Yatanya Grodha Bijasta, Shakti, we've done. In the Paradrishika Tantra, the other example is the seed of the banyan tree, which is so small and so unified, and yet out of this grows the huge banyan tree with all these trunks and leaves and branches and roots and so on, and fruit. So these two examples are given by the Tantras themselves, and they're very speaking, very beautiful. So this undifferentiated consciousness, which potentially contains within itself the totality, because the whole peacock is contained in the egg and the whole banyan tree is contained in the seed. But in the consciousness of the yogi, that totality is contained in his unified consciousness. And the term here, by pratipatti. Pratipatti is also a very interesting term, but anyhow, this would be for Sanskritists. Now, what is this unified vision? And here he quotes the Vijnana Bhairava, which is one of those very powerful statements. At the end was 110 of Vijnana Bhairava. Chalasyeva urmayo vahnir jvala bhangaya prabharave mamaiva bhairava seta vishvabhangya vipedita. Just as waves arise from water, flames from fire, and rays from the sun, in the same way the differentiated aspects of the universe have sprung from me, Bhairava. Now this me, Bhairava, it can be Bhairava or it can be the yogi. Because when the yogi, his consciousness is already identified with Bhairava, then it has sprung from him, from the yogi. So that's why this very powerful, it is that total vision of unity, of oneness. Waves from water, flames from fire, and rays from the sun. All this has sprung from me, this whole universe, Bhairava. So, well, all these quotations from the Vijnana Bhairava, they may be understood just as statements of a state, but they have to be taken as practices, as dharanas. Of course, there's a very high level of a dharana, but it is not impossible to practice it, because the only hindering factor is our, as the same sutra says, considering ourselves identified with our body, or with our mind, or whatever. So because that is the hindrance for any universal experience. And the moment you overcome that limitation of the identification with body, etc., then you are ready for this kind of experience. Experience and dharana. So just as waves from water, flames from fire, and rays from the sun. Everything has sprung from me. All the universal currents are one with me, rise from me who is one with Bhairava. And again in the Spandakarika, Bhokta eva bhogya bhavena sada sarvatra samstita. The experient himself continues in the form of the object of experience, always and everywhere. This, anyhow. Now, what this sutra teaches is that vision of oneness. And the vision of oneness which presupposes our de-identification with the body. And as many of this, even these Vedantis, they do, I am not the body, I am not this, I am not that. And of course the Buddhists. Now, here I must read a summary by Mark. Plunged in the ecstasy of universal consciousness, the yogi experiences through its pure will, his pure will, the arising of his own cosmic nature. He knows that he is one with all embodied beings and that his physical body is not his true nature, but an externally perceivable form. So here the two meanings are brought together. So it is a tremendous experience. The ecstasy of his universal consciousness. So the question is always, when you think of practically, what goes before? Is it before that you de-identify yourself with the body, or you have this experience and then that de-identification happens spontaneously? Both are possible. See, those who have that spontaneous Udyamo Bhairava, to whom that happens, that body consciousness by itself drops off. It's impossible to hold on that I am this body. So either it comes from an ecstatic or spontaneous enlightenment, or it is the end result of practice or dharana that I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am not this prana, and so on and so on. But here, of course, he favors the first, because we are in Shambhavabhaya. So the spontaneous experience of that universal oneness, that makes you drop this whole limitation of being bound by this body and mind, etc. And such kind of experience can happen, of course, Swamiji says, with open eyes, Nimilana Samadhi, Unmilana Samadhi, which when you meditate outside in nature, you are somewhere on the mountain or on the seashore, and this can happen, that is suddenly you have this experience of oneness with the universe and of that this total compact oneness like this peacock's egg. And now he says, oh, this is very easy. He says, this experience. The introduction to the 15th Sutra, page 58. Yacha idam sarvasya trishyasya sharirataya shunyantasya cha trishyataya ekarupam prakashanam uktam na etadurgatam. It has been said that all perceptible phenomena, right up to the void, appears to the yogi uniformly like his own body. This is not impossible. Rather, and now comes another very important sutra. Hridaye citta sanghatat drishya svapa darshanam. Hridaya, the heart. Now we will just see what is understood by heart in this tradition. Hridaya and Chitta. No, Chitta is the mind. When the heart and the mind, Sankhata. Now Sankhata is a kind of very powerful merging or uniting or embracing, or they are, the mind is united with the heart. Hridaya is in locative, so in the heart. So the heart is the locus of that unification, of that uniting. Hridaye citta sangatat drishya svapadarshanan. Then, when the mind is united to the core of consciousness, that means the heart, every observable phenomenon, drishya we have just had, and even the void appear as a form of consciousness. Well, let's see what Swamiji says. I have not quoted much of Swamiji's translation because it was an oral instruction, so this is not the literal translation, but still, let us see what. When his thoughts, his means the yogis, are diverted to the center of God consciousness, that means the heart, then he feels the existence of God consciousness in oneness in the objective world, drishya, and in the world of negation, svapa. Svapa is also related to swapna. Now, one of the most classical definition of the heart, by Kshemaraja, which one has to really remember. What is heart, Hridaya? It is neither the physical heart, nor the emotional heart, nor the mental, nothing. Much more than that. Vishva pratishta sthanatvat chit prakasho hridayam. And those who know Sanskrit, please remember this phrase. The heart is the light of consciousness, chit prakasha, because it is Vishva pratishta sthanatvat. It is the locus, it is the place of establishment of the universe, where everything is established. Vishva pratishta sthanatvat chit prakasho hridayam. This is a very powerful um, understanding of the heart, which is in the whole tradition. Heart means this. It's the light of consciousness, which is the foundation of the locus, because it is heart, still it has an implication of a place, or of a locus or something, of the establishment of everything, or of the universe, Vishwa. Hridaya means the light of consciousness, inasmuch it is the foundation of the entire universe. Yes, yes. Tatra sankartat chalata tat ekagra bhavanat drishyasya. Now, chitta sankarta means the concentration of the fickle mind on that foundational consciousness, means on that heart. Drishyasya means of all objective phenomena like blue, body, prana, and mind. And svapa, because Drishya svapa darshanam in the sutra, svapasya means of the void, that is, of the absence of every objective phenomenon. So it is always like bhava and abhava. It's not only existence but also non-existence. Everything is included. Nothing is excluded. Darshanam, what means darshana? Means the appearance of everything as it is in its essential reality, devoid of the distinction between subject and object, like a component of oneself. Tyakta grahaka vibhedena yatha vastu svanga kalpataya prakashanam bhavati. So that refers again to the previous sutra, considering everything as one's own body, or as the parts of one's own self, svanga. Chit prakashatam abhinivishamanam hi chittam tat achuritam eva vishvam pashyate. The individual mind, intently entering into the universal light of foundational consciousness, sees the entire universe as one with that consciousness. And now we are getting a dharana from the Vijnana Bhairava, one of our favorite. I say our because I'm not alone in loving this. And this, I would recommend you to practice this when we are in meditation. This can be practiced by anybody. And this is Vijnana Bhairava 49. Hridyakashe nimilaksha padma samputa madhyaga ananya cheta subhage param saubhagyam apnuyat. If one merges one's senses in the space of the heart, that is, at the center between the two halves of the heart lotus, with an undistracted mind, then, O Blessed One attains supreme blessedness. This is one of those beautiful dharanas which are centered on the heart. And heart, again, well, it's very close to the Upanishadic Hridakasha, the space of the heart, which is as vast as the universe, universal space, because the sun and the moon and the stars and everything is contained in this akasha, and this tiny space in the heart. And here, these two lotuses, because he has spoken of subjectivity and objectivity, so subject and object, idam and aham. So these two, they create a space in between. And that empty space, that is where one has to concentrate. Not on the lotuses, but on that empty space. Ananya Cheta, now like any concentration, any meditation, the basic necessity is to have this Ananya Cheta, a mind which is not directed to anything else. Ananya Cheta. You don't wander with your mind in the market or in Delhi or somewhere when you're sitting in the meditation hall. But Ananya Cheta, keeping your mind on nothing else. And then you will attain the supreme blessedness, Param Saubhagyam. So this is a dharana, especially, when you have a kind of visualization. It is a visualization because you have these two lotuses, you have the space and so on. And visualization means what we call bhavana. See, a kind of meditation called bhavana where you start from an image, from a visualization or from a thought, and then you proceed to thoughtlessness. And this bhavana is one of the most favored practices in the Vijnana Bhairava. That's why often the verb comes bhavayet. One should meditate. But here, he does not say, no word, no verb. No verb like bhavayet or something, but it is understood. Nidlina aksha, that this is not to be forgotten. Merging one's senses. So, because the senses have the outgoing tendency, we know this very well, but then merging the senses in that inner space means all the senses. And that very often it comes in the Vijnana Bhairava. It is not easy to merge all the senses in one place, in one center, one empty space. But it is so significant because the senses are not to be left out, that you just concentrate on something and leave out the senses. No, they have to be included. They have to take part in that. Otherwise, you just leave them out. So this is one dharana which I always recommend to be practiced. And then he gives interpretation of when the Vijnana Bhairava says Param Saubhagyam, the supreme blessedness, and this he says Vishva Ishvarata Apate. This fortune or blessedness means the acquisition of the lordship of the universe, being the Vishveshvarata. Tattva vritti samapannam mahagyogina uddishya srimat svachandepi. And then the Svachanda Tantra also Sacha bhuteshu sarveshu bhavatatve dvendriyeshu cha. This is an expression, all these are expressions of universal consciousness. He who has realized his identity with the highest reality, pervading the two aspects, we are not going into these two aspects, manifest in the unconscious entities like the unmoving ones and conscious beings like the moving ones, means abides as identical with Bhairava in all beings, objects, tattvas like earth, etc., and the senses. Let's see what Swamiji. And Swamiji's such a yogi situated as one with this whole universe pervades it because he pervades everything which exists, all classes of beings in elements, in the organic world, in animate and inanimate objects. His consciousness is not called God consciousness, but rather his God consciousness is transformed into universal consciousness. So there is a difference. Universal consciousness. So this is the whole meaning of this sutra, which describes a practice, but because hridaya chitta sangatat, so there is a process of unifying the mind in the heart, or merging the mind in the heart. So that process is something which can be practiced. So both the objective and the non-existent, everything should be unified in that heart, which is the basis, the foundation of the whole universe. So this one definition is to be kept in mind. Now I would like to stop with this sutra, which is very important. And first of all, I have not given you a chance for questions. And then there was some idea of going out for our not only walk, but hopefully meditation outside, to go up in the direction of that ashram. Because so that we should organize it after or at the tea time, because we need some cars to go up to the upper beer. Yeah. Because that yesterday it was not possible to meditate there, but up there we used to meditate on the rocks, and there was no disturbance. So if everybody agrees, yes, Daisy agrees. Yeah.